Welcome to Whippoorwill Holler. I'm Miss Lori and this is Mr. Brown. We live in the hills of Arkansas. We love the Lord. Keepers of the old way, but accept some of the new. We love to cook and we love to eat. We love to garden. It's in our blood. It's how we stay sustainable and fill our pantry. We do a lot of canning and preserving. We live a sustainable life. We love our family. We work hard. And every once in a while, we like to dance. So y'all join us. Welcome back to Whippoorwill Holler. I'm so glad y'all are here and that you stopped by to visit with me a little bit. Got a little different video today, and it has been a requested video, but it's something that I had to really think about too, because it involves a lot of thinking back and things that that I had to go through at different stages of my life, and how we got through it. So many people, regardless how you see them sometimes on the outside, you never know what they've went through maybe in the past, and things that weren't bad, but it was just part of life, and things that people went through to make them who they are today, and how they become survivors, and just stronger people. And I know a lot of y'all, just like me, have had those certain stages in your life. And it's not that it was bad, like I said. It was just something that we had to go through, endure, and get through it. And always better days were always ahead, that's for sure. And the biggest thing is that the good Lord was always, always looking over us and taking care of us. And it's just something that I've been wanting to share a little bit, because there's people are struggling with the fact that groceries are high, and there's no doubt about how much groceries have went up. Now, with that being said, and I have said this before in probably a couple other videos, groceries have been going up since I started buying groceries. I mean, I could tell a difference every year. I mean, groceries have been going up. It's not something new. And if you think it is, then you weren't buying groceries back in the 70s then, evidently, 60s, 50s, whatever. But I'm just telling you, groceries have been going up, just like inflation been going up forever. It's not something new. But that don't mean that it makes it any easier, because it does not make it easier, that's for sure. But there are ways. Back in the day, when we say that we had hard times, that the pantry wasn't always full, and then you say, well, you must not have prepared yourself very well for that. You need to be careful about saying stuff like that, because there's a lot of people that didn't have and still don't have the money to stock their pantries for 6 months to a year. And I know them people. Some of my first videos was videos of how I, over the years, have stocked my pantry. And you can go to my playlist and you can find them videos. But it wasn't a prepper style pantry, and it still isn't. I grew up knowing and seeing how to prepare your pantry, you know, how to preserve, how to put up, and how to survive. My grandparents' pantry was not a pantry that was, it was a yearly, it was to get through the wintertime pantry. That's what it was. And that's what most pantries were. Now let's even go further back than that. As a young married woman with a few kids and a husband that worked 2 and 3, sometimes 4 jobs, that didn't mean the money was always there, that you could just, I could just go to the grocery store and buy whatever I wanted. It was a weekly grocery shop, and I bought necessities of what I knew to get through that week. So let's even go farther back than that. So you're going to be learning some things about Miss Lori that you never knew. We're going to go back further than that. We're going to go back further than me living with my grandparents. We're going to go back just a year or two earlier than that. We're going to say that I'm between 11, 12, 13 years old. The guardian that I lived with at that time, she had a son, and that son was a brother to me, and he still is to this day. I love him. He's will always be my brother. We're not blood, but he's my brother. He was 7 years younger than me. But anyways, the house was empty a lot. So that meant that I was there to prepare meals as a young child so that we could eat. And there was not always a full pantry. In fact, was times I could open that cabinet and there just wasn't much staring back at me. But I can tell you what was, and I'm going to show you something. And this video is not going to be a video of recipes, all the recipes that you're probably going to want to do. Some of these recipes are called hardcore survival meals because that's all that was in there. And one of them was, and I remember doing this more than once, it's several times. Do y'all remember when Showboat pork and beans, you could get them for 33 cents a can when I got married, and then before that, I think they were probably even a little bit cheaper than that. Probably you could get 4 cans for $1 back in the early 70s. Not sure about that, and it would also depend on your store and, you know, the part of the country you live in too. But there were several times that I would open that pantry up, and the only really thing in there would be pork and beans. I don't remember a lot of meat in the freezer. I do remember sometimes there would be hamburger meat in there. And when I say hamburger meat, it was usually, you know, the cheap hamburger meat that back then it was less than $1 a pound. And I would get that out, not really knowing, you know, what I'm going to do with it. There's several things I could do with it. So there's at least several meals I can make out of a pound of hamburger meat, especially for 2 people. So one of the meals would be to grab that only can of pork and beans and make a meal out of it. So using that pound of hamburger meat, I would divide it up in quarters. So I would use 1/4 of a pound of hamburger meat, and I would cook it up. Now, I don't remember any seasonings being in the pantry. All I remember is salt and pepper on the stove. And of course, being that young, I didn't even know much about seasonings either. Never seen much cooking, really. And then opening up a can of pork and beans and pouring it in there with that hamburger meat. Now, I'm not making a pot of cowboy beans. I'm not making baked beans. We all know there's recipes out there using hamburger meat and pork and beans and different, barbecue sauce, or making, your own barbecue sauce and making the cowboy beans. That's not what this was. This was a survival supper because that's all there was there. I had a little brother to feed. So it was 1/4 pound of hamburger meat and a can of pork and beans. Now you can look at this and think, oh, that's awful. Well, no, it really wasn't. I think to me and my brother, and probably there was a loaf of bread sitting there, so I remember eating a piece of bread with it, and that would be our supper. So there's ways of surviving without all the modern day tricks of trying to feed your family when there's nothing there. I'm talking bare bones, y'all. I'm not talking about, oh, I've got $25. I'm going to run to the Dollar Tree and I'm going to get several meals. That's not what I'm talking about. This is bare bones, nothing, no money in your hand, making a supper for my brother, or in your case, maybe it's you and your husband, maybe it's you and a child, maybe you're a single parent and you don't have even $1 to your name to run to the store and buy anything. So that was one of my survival meals. And it wasn't too bad. In fact, after cooking that meal, I did eat some, and it brought back them memories. And I thought, it didn't taste that bad. In fact, it was pretty good. And I thought, I can't feel bad about that. In fact, I felt pretty blessed. Now, I don't know if many of y'all would even do that. But it's not a choice. It wasn't a choice. So it was one of the meals that we enjoyed, and it filled our belly, and we could go to bed at night and start another day to figure out what was going to be on the table after that. I don't want no sympathy for some of these things I'm going to be telling you and we're going to be going over. So I'll take another 1/4 pound of that hamburger meat, and me and Danny still eat this way. There's 1/4 pound of hamburger meat, and I've got 2 people to feed. We didn't have french fries, frozen french fries, and I still don't keep frozen french fries. I'm not a big french fry eater anyways, but I don't keep them. I don't buy them. And of course, I didn't buy them back then because I couldn't afford it. And then being, back in the 70s, when I was talking about being in that household with me and my brother, and there just wasn't much there. So hamburgers back then, on a very, very tight, no budget, no, you couldn't, it didn't matter. You just dealt with what you had. There wasn't hamburger buns, and there wasn't frozen french fries. But there was an iron skillet, and there was potatoes, if you were blessed enough to have them potatoes. And Danny and I still eat this meal. So I cut up, dice up some potatoes, throw them in my iron skillet with some onions, 1/4 of a pound of hamburger meat will make me and him a hamburger, just like it did back in the days when I was making supper for me and my brother. And then even after that, at my grandparents' house, we didn't have French fries. And we didn't have hamburger buns. But we did have white bread on the table, and we had potatoes. And it's still to this day one of my favorite meals. Just a fried up hamburger in an iron skillet on white bread with fried potatoes. And that is a survival meal. And why I say that is because nowadays they think they have to run to the store and get hamburger buns and a bag of high-dollar French fries. One of my meals that is probably one of the most meals that would probably be in the number one slot of a survival supper, breakfast, whatever you needed to get through that day. And a lot of times we ate this for supper, not just for breakfast. And you know, back in the day, and I'm talking about way back, let's talk about even the 1800s. Most of the time they didn't eat 3 meals a day, y'all. They ate 1 meal a day. And number one, because that's probably all they had. And a lot of times they didn't even get up and eat a breakfast. They get up and they go to work. They come in and they would eat that main big meal. Or I say big meal, what I meant is whatever was there, whether if it was biscuits and gravy, or, you know, if they were lucky enough to have a hen out back that they killed and made dumplings or whatever. That's what I'm talking about. But making a pan of biscuits, if you were blessed enough to have some flour. Now, I'm not talking about self-rising flour, because a lot of us nowadays will open up a bag of self-rising flour and make biscuits. I'm talking about just plain flour, all-purpose flour, because back in the day, even in my younger married days, I didn't buy all the different flours. I had one flour in the cabinet, and that was all-purpose flour. That was it. And even going further back than that, that's what was on most people's in their pantry, was all-purpose, and that was it, because that's all they could afford. That's all there was. So baking powder biscuits. A lot of times there wasn't even milk. And I'm talking not fresh milk, not canned milk, and not even powdered milk. So you'd have to use water. But this recipe, it calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 cup of lard or shortening, and 3/4 cup of milk. And if you didn't have milk and had to use water, you'd have to cut back on the water just a little bit. I've made many a pan of biscuits using water and not milk. So you just mix all that up, put them in a pan with a little bit of bacon grease maybe you got on the stove left over, and put them in the oven. Now let's talk about the gravy. If you were blessed enough to have anywhere from 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 a cup of flour, all-purpose flour left over, you can make you some gravy to feed your family, even if you don't have milk. No milk, no fresh milk, no powdered milk, no canned milk. This is what we call water gravy. And we use it from the drippings of whatever maybe we've cooked, whether if you were blessed enough to have a little bit of bacon. And a lot of times, I've seen times that I did not have the money to buy bacon. So, but most of the time I had leftover bacon grease from when I did cook up bacon. And when we did have bacon, we had to be kind of rationing a little bit. We didn't just cook a whole pound of bacon. That pound of bacon had to last us pretty much all week, if I was able to buy it. And back then, I can remember some of the bacon that I would buy would be like 99 cents for about, I can't even remember if it's 16 ounces or 12 ounces of bacon. But you can make you some water gravy. And you should use them drippings of whatever you had. Maybe you had fried up a chicken and you've got a little bit of grease left over from that. You can make you some water gravy. You just use them drippings with a little bit of flour. And what I like to do is I like to absolutely brown that flour up and make a roux gravy. Because you're going to be using water. The water is going to be a little bland tasting. So if you get that flour and get you a good brown roux, you're going to have a good tasting gravy. And not miss that flour as much. A little bit of salt and pepper, if you've got salt and pepper in the house. And you put that roux gravy over them biscuits, and you've got a meal. Sometimes I think that, especially nowadays, and I'm just as guilty, especially when my kids come over and we're eating and we've got a big meal, we've got so many sides and, just so much that it's really too much. So when you're making a meal and you think, well, I don't have a can of green beans, I don't have potatoes, I don't even have a meat to survive and to make it day by day. You don't have to have all that at every meal, at any meal. You make you some biscuits and make you a pan of gravy, a pan of water gravy because you don't have no water, or you've got to really watch your milk because you can't use it all up for making gravy. You've got a meal right there to feed you, to feed your husband, to feed your wife, to feed a child. I had 4 children. I had 2 boys and 2 girls. And they were raised on biscuits and gravy. We didn't always have meat. So let's get to talking about that. And this is where a lot of people are not going to resonate with me at all. Because it's all going to depend on how you were raised. When I finally moved up here to Arkansas to live with my grandparents, and then I met Danny when I was 13. So I've been with his family since I was 13 years old. So I'm so used to wild game. Because Danny himself and his whole family, and then the whole area, most people, they hunted and fished, and that's what they ate. That's what was in their freezer. So yes, even my children grew up eating fried squirrel, deer meat, fresh fish out of the river. And you can't get any healthier than that. And I know some of y'all are like, back off just a little bit because, you just really, you weren't raised that way. You just don't know about it. But let me tell you something, that was some of the healthiest eating we ever did. Deer meat is very healthy. And I know I've talked about frying squirrel way back in the past, and people would be like, oh, that's just a rodent. I don't know how you can do that. Well, I'm going to tell y'all something. And this even goes back way back since the beginning of time. If you've got a family to feed, you have to kindly step back out of that mindset and go out there, and you got to survive, which means you've got to go out there and kill a few squirrels, or you've got to go out there and you've got to deer hunt and put some deer or elk or whatever up in the freezer. You got to get your fishing pole and go down to the river, if you're blessed enough to have as many rivers as we've grew up with. Maybe down to a pond, and bring them fish in like Danny would, and like his mama would, and even, other people that's lived this life. And that's what was put in your freezer. So when we talk about eating meat, my grandpa raised rabbits, tame rabbits. And that replaced, now they also grew chickens to eat, plus, for the eggs and everything else. So if there was a chicken, Grandma could go out there and get her chicken and, throw it in a skillet. But also, Grandpa, there would be a time that there would be a rabbit killing, and we'd put them rabbits up in the freezer. You talk about some good eating. And we'd have fried rabbit and biscuits and gravy. And if you don't think that won't fill your belly, then you're sadly mistaken. We didn't have to have a 5-course meal. My kids grew up, Danny was a big hunter, and he was going to feed his family. Things were tight, week by week, because, like I've talked about so many times, the money just wasn't there. Didn't matter how many jobs a man worked in this area, it was hard. And, Danny would be gone all morning, all day, and, come in late at night sometimes because he had that many jobs just to get us through. So my kids grew up on fried squirrel, fried deer meat, and if you had a hand grinder, you would grind that meat up, that deer meat up, and you'd make hamburgers out of it, or chili. We cut enough stew meat off the deer ham, to make deer stew, and I'm telling you, to this day, my mouth waters thinking about deer stew. And they would also take like the shoulder part of the deer and maybe put it out on the grill and cook it all day. That wasn't my favorite, but I know a lot of people did eat stuff like that. And of course, there's other wild game that people in the hills, they'd hunt and eat. I can say there's a lot of it I never did eat, but I did eat fried squirrel. My children grew up with it. Rabbit, even wild rabbit, tame rabbit, and deer meat. We raised hogs, so we had pork at some point, but we didn't eat a lot of beef, because even though there were cattle on the farm, we didn't eat beef. We had to sell them to, we had to have the money. So eating wild meat is part of survival. And you've always heard a country boy or a country girl will survive, and that's the honest truth. There's one thing that I do know, and I do know that a pot of dumplings will feed a bunch of people. Whether if you come from the area where you make drop dumplings or you make flat dumplings. It's just how you were raised or what you like. I like them both. And I know there's people in other parts of the country that are like, that's not dumplings. This is dumplings. Dumplings means something different in all different areas, so we need to think about that. Like a dumpling in China or somewhere. It's a field dumpling. Or in just other places in the country. It's just dumplings means something different. And up here in the hills, dumplings means a drop dumpling, which is a biscuit dumpling, or slicks is what some people call them, which is just a really thick, rolled out noodle-like, but it's a dumpling. We don't call them noodles because they're not noodles. They're usually cut in squares like this, and they're thick, and that's what we call dumplings. So making dumplings it's an easy thing. You can throw you a chicken in a pot with some water, salt and pepper. If you're blessed enough to have maybe a little bit of poultry seasoning, you can put that in your water and cook that chicken up and make you some broth with that chicken. And once you got that done, just to thicken it up a little bit, of course we didn't use cream of chicken soup or nothing like that. If we had a little bit of sweet milk or a little cream, we'd put a little bit in that pot. And that's what we would make that broth a little bit richer. And for our dumplings, we'd have a cup of flour, just all-purpose flour. You're going to have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of pepper, a half a teaspoon of maybe either a little thyme or parsley if you have it, but if you didn't use it. A 1/3 cup of milk. If you don't have milk, you can use water, and 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And you just mix this up, and then you just set it back for just a little bit. Let it sit there, and then come back and just kind of drop your drop dumplings in that good old rich broth. I usually do mine by, teaspoon, a good heaping teaspoon, because they're going to swell up. Then I'm going to put this on just a low boil and put the lid on it and just let them cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. You don't want to stir them. You just want to leave them alone and put the lid on it and let them cook 15-20 minutes. And you're going to have a big pot of dumplings that you can feed several people. And it is so good, especially in wintertime when it's cold. You can have a pan of cornbread with it, or leftover biscuits, something like that. It's a meal by itself. I know, if I have people over and I make a pot of dumplings, I'm always going to, get me some of my fresh green beans. I'm probably going to make mashed potatoes. You know what I'm saying? But you don't have to do that when you're in survival mode, when you've got to come in and feed your family. You don't have to have all that in one meal. And this is just what it's not that we don't want to do that. Because y'all know, looking back at my videos, y'all know I'm a Southern cook. And there's always, a decent meal put on the table. But there's also times that you can't do that. You've got to be sparingly with what you have to make it last. So you don't have to have a 5-course meal at every meal. I want to show y'all. I know that there's, working in the school system, I'm retired after 27 years, but being there 27 years, I can point out a child that's not got food at home and it's not eating well. I've seen it for so many years, I can point them out every time. Sometimes the parents can't help it, and sometimes they can. But I'm just going to show y'all what you can do. When your pantry, there's nothing. There's nothing in that pantry. Maybe you've got a handful of flour left in your flour bin. Maybe you've got a handful of pinto beans and you've got water. Maybe there's a little bit of salt and pepper. Maybe you've got a little bit of bacon grease, and you've made you a little pot of pinto beans. Well, I don't have no cornmeal to make any cornbread. I can't go to the store. I ain't got no money. And I've only got just a handful of flour. I don't have any baking powder left. What am I going to do? I'm going to show you. You're going to take it depends on how many people's eating. You're just feeding 2 people. Take you a half a cup of all-purpose flour. Now, optional is you can put you just a little bit of salt in there, but if you don't have salt or you got to ration that salt, don't put it in there. You don't have to have it. Then get you about, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 cup of water and start mixing that up. Now, this is what you're going to call poor man's flatbread cracker. We don't call these tortillas. This is not a tortilla. This is not an authentic tortilla. This is something that you would have seen back in the days when even the Indians were out and they had a little bit of wheat and some water and they'd make some flatbread. Now, I used to make, when we were at the big farm and living back in the other area, way back in the boonies, we went to a little local church. And the ladies would take turns, getting the communion ready and stuff. So when I would do communion, I would make the unleavened bread. I'd make it myself. And I do have a video for that, and I will put it down below if y'all want to see that. And I know a lot of people that see me making this flatbread are saying that's unleavened bread. Yes, you're right. But this is a survival flatbread that you can make, and very easy. And you can double the recipe if you've got that flour. If you don't have, but I'm just telling you, if you just got a handful of flour, you can make these and have them with a pot of beans, with maybe a few scrambled eggs. Maybe you got some, a couple eggs left in the refrigerator. There's just, a lot of times I'll make these up and just smear butter on them and eat them. It's just so good. There's a lot of things you can do with this just easy flatbread. Now, when you first cook them up, they can be soft and pliable, but there's no kind of oil, no lard, no butter in these. So if you didn't eat all of them and there's a little bit left, they will kind of harden up and then turn to like a cracker. So then you've got a cracker. You can do this in the oven, or you can do it in a skillet, either one. Or you can go outside and do it over an open fire. But this is just another survival recipe when you've got nothing in your pantry except a little handful of flour and a little water. Now I'm just going to be baking enough for me and Mr. Brown, so I just got a half a cup of all-purpose flour, about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you do not have to put salt in there. It's not something you have to have in it. I just kind of like the little bit of saltiness to it, and if back in the day they didn't have salt, they didn't put it in there. This is a 1/4 cup of warm water. I'm not going to put it all in there. I'm just going to work this and add a little to it if I need it. You just want a good pliable dough. You don't want it real sticky to your fingers, or that's too much water. And I'm just going to work this in the bowl, and I'm going to knead it just a little bit. And you see how the dough come together pretty quick. It's pliable but not too sticky. And I'm just going to knead it just a little bit with the palm of my hand. Okay, let's cover it up for about 10 minutes. I'm just going to pinch me off a piece. This will make 3 little flatbreads. I'm just going to roll them out. You can roll it out to any size that you want. If you didn't want 3 different, you could just roll the whole thing out to one big flatbread. Roll it out to whatever thickness you like. I like them kind of thin myself. Okay, I got a hot skillet, and I like to put just a little bit of oil, but you don't have to. You can do it in a dry pan. I just like the texture that it gives the flatbread with just a little bit of oil in the pan. My skillet was pretty hot. And it'll start kind of to get little air bubbles in them. And you want it to brown really good on that one side before you flip it. You want them good and brown on both sides. It's about that easy. And you see how pliable they are. These are so good with a bowl of beans or a little bit of taco meat, or maybe for breakfast with some scrambled eggs and just a really good flatbread that didn't use hardly any ingredients. Okay, let's talk about breakfast. If there's one thing that was, I remember always being in the pantry, there'd be a little bit of oatmeal. And making a pot of oatmeal is so easy. You just need, a couple handful of oatmeal. And usually it was old-fashioned rolled oats, but I know what I would buy is usually quick oats, and then I usually had both. I'd have the old-fashioned rolled oats, and then I'd have quick oats for just different things. But oatmeal is one of the cheapest things that you can feed your family, and it's not only just for breakfast. You know what I'm saying, y'all? You can eat it for supper if you had to. If that's the only thing that's in your pantry, there's no meat. This is during wintertime, and maybe you didn't have a big garden, because I know there's a lot of people that lived in the city, they didn't have big gardens, and they weren't able to put up, a bunch of produce in for the wintertime. So we all had to think about these different scenarios, and but oatmeal it was always a big staple, even back in the days, to have oatmeal in the pantry. So a pot of oatmeal, warm oatmeal will fill your belly, and it just gets you going. But like I said, you don't have to eat it for just breakfast. You could eat for lunch, supper, whatever. If all you got is a slice of bread to eat with it, maybe a piece of toast, maybe you did have a couple of rashers of bacon that you could eat with your oatmeal. To me, that's probably one of my favorite breakfasts, really. And Mr. Brown likes it too. So don't throw away that oatmeal, though. If you got some oatmeal left over, never throw it away. You can eat it the next day. Or what my grandmother used to do with the leftover oatmeal is she would make an old-fashioned oatmeal cake. Okay, in our bowl for the oatmeal cake, we're going to put in a cup of the leftover oatmeal. And you can double this recipe if you want to. This makes about a 9x9 cake pan. Got a half a cup of melted butter. We're going to put in a half a cup of white sugar, a half a cup of packed brown sugar. And Grandma always made her own brown sugar with regular sugar and molasses. Sometimes she'd make it darker and use more molasses in it. I'm going to put a teaspoon of vanilla. And 2 eggs. We're going to turn the mixture on and mix it up a little bit. Okay, we got that mixed up. We're going to put in 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Fourth a teaspoon of salt. About a teaspoon of cinnamon. We just got, I'm going to mix this up just a little bit. And I've got a couple of tablespoons of milk. And I'm just going to pour a little bit in at a time to see, look at the consistency. Because you don't want it too much. But it usually takes about 2 tablespoons of milk. It's already smelling so good. This is one of my grandpa's favorite cakes. We will be making a boiled icing to go over it, like a glaze. And I forgot my teaspoon of baking soda, so you've got to have a teaspoon of baking soda too. That's what I just threw in there. Okay. I've got, this pan is actually 11 by 8. I think if you put it in a 9 by 13, your cake's going to be a little thinner, which is okay because I've done that before too. So I just oiled my pan just a little bit, my baking dish. My oven is at 350. And we're going to get this baking in there, and probably I'll check it in about 20 minutes. Could take up to 25 to 30 minutes, just depends. And while it's still hot, we need to go ahead and make our boiled icing to go on top, which is pretty simple too. My grandpa liked simple desserts, simple cakes. He didn't like a lot of frosting. And Grandma would make the boiled icing, but she didn't add any kind of coconut or pecans to it. But I do because I just like it. Okay, this is pretty easy too. This is a 1/2 cup of butter that I'm melting. I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of milk. And we're going to bring this to a boil. Now, if you want to, you can do like I did. I added a handful of coconut, and I'm going to add a little handful of pecans. But usually Grandma didn't put coconut and pecans in hers. I just, because I've got it, I'm going to add it to it. I really like it over this cake. So you want to bring this to a boil, and you want to boil it for about 3 minutes. Okay, you can see it's thickened up after 3 minutes, and we're going to pour it over our warm cake. Our cake is out of the oven, and it's still warm, and I'm taking a toothpick, and I'm just going to poke a few holes in this cake. This is a really moist cake, too. But if you did not, like I said, if you did not have the coconut and the pecans, it's just, the glaze is just as wonderful without it. So let's get this poured over while the glaze is still hot and the cake is still warm. And as this cake cools off, the glaze will kind of set up a little bit. And what I love about this cake is the cake part is really moist, and the glaze is really, it's just not overly sweet. It's just a really good cake to me, and I think that's why my grandfather really liked it. So we all know that dry beans is one of the cheapest things you can have in your pantry. And it's one of the easiest things to cook if you got water and beans. Of course, you do need a little bit of salt and pepper, but you know, a lot of times people didn't have that. I can tell you that my grandmother's pantry seasoning, she didn't have seasonings. All I remember in her cabinet would be salt and pepper that sat by the stove. I remember her having poultry seasoning, sage, because she always made, you know, quite a bit of chicken and dressing. She might have had some onion powder. I don't remember garlic powder or thyme or just anything. There was just a little handful of stuff that she had. And I guess maybe that's the reason that I love herbs and making my own seasonings. And me and Danny use a lot of spices and stuff is because I didn't grow up with it. And as I started as, you know, my own family and cooking, I just really went crazy over all the spices that I learned to love. And I love them to this day. So making a pot of beans, if you don't have a hog jowl, if you don't have bacon, if you don't have a piece of ham or something to put in that beans, it's okay. You don't have to have it. I think people think they can't cook a pot of beans if they don't have some kind of pork to put in there. There were times that that was not available for people. But they did have beans, dry beans, and water, and would make a pot of beans. So to survive, you can have a pot of beans, even without all the meat. But we all know that any kind of pork is going to flavor that bean up. We all know that. But that's not what these videos or this video is about. This is about survival times. And what you have, and what you don't have, and what you don't have to survive. Now, maybe you've got a little bit of bacon grease over there by the cook stove, and put you some of that in them beans. I've done that many times to flavor up them beans. If you've got an onion, chop you up an onion to put in there. But if you don't have anything but just a handful of beans and water, you're fine. You're going to survive is what I'm telling you. This is about survival and what things people have had to do to survive. You can't be picky about stuff when you're trying to survive, and that's just the honest truth. So you cook you up a pot of beans. My grandma cooked. She always had probably twice a week. She'd cook a pot of beans twice a week because that was always a side dish. Now I'm going to show y'all something that she also done, because we did not, there was not like a lot of lunch meat or stuff like that, but we always seemed like we always had some kind of leftover for the next day to eat for lunch. But especially after cooking a pot of white beans. Now when I say white beans, I mean Great Northern beans. They're some of my favorite. And I've just got beans, couple handful of beans, water, salt, and pepper, and I actually had a little bit of bacon this time. About 3 hours. On the cook stove, and we got us a pan of good old cornbread to go with it. Cornbread can go a long ways too. And this is one of the best little frugal meals, is a pot of stewed potatoes. Some people call this potato soup. We call it stewed potatoes. And you eat this with a little bit of cornbread. And it's just one of my favorite. And it's a meal by itself. Okay, I'm going to show you what my grandma would do the next day after she had cooked up a pot of Great Northern beans. Now this is about 2 cups, and I mashed them, and then I drained some of the juice out of it. There wasn't a whole lot of juice, but I did drain it. So 2 cups of mashed white beans. We got a little bit of onion to put in here. And this is just another way to cook up another frugal meal. This is 1/4 cup of just all-purpose flour. You can use self-rising if you want to. We're going to add 1 egg. And some pepper and some salt. Now you can add any kind of other spices in there that you want to, but Grandma was always pretty simple. We're going to stir this up, and then what we're making is bean fritters, and we're going to be cooking these up in the iron skillet. And there's different ways that I would eat these fritters, but one of them would be that we would make a bean fritter sandwich. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Well, let me tell you something. They're absolutely delicious. I'm going to go get my iron skillet heated, and we'll start our fritters. Okay, you want to put just a little bit of oil in the bottom of your skillet. You're not deep frying them. You just need enough in there just to brown them. You want your skillet on probably a medium low. You want to get good and hot before you put your fritters in there. That way they'll start browning right off the bat. And you can make your fritters as big as you want. Since I'm going to be making a couple of the bean fritter sandwiches, I'm going to do 2 of them, pretty good size. And then the rest of them, I'm just going to make little bean fritters. And I know you can see where I'm going with this. This is another frugal meal that you could do the next day to feed a family. Kids, if they don't even like beans, I guarantee you they're going to like these bean fritters. We love them. It's one of the memories that I just cherish from Grandma, because she could do this stuff and make anything taste good. Okay, you want them good and brown before you flip them. Really, that's not brown enough for me, but we'll leave it. I like them really good and toasty brown on each side. It's kind of slick and falling off my spatula there. Okay, these are all done and pretty well browned up the way I like them. I'm going to go ahead and fry up the rest of them into just little fritters. Anything that's left over you can actually put in the freezer and warm them up another time. Okay, I'm going to show you what me and Grandma and Grandpa would eat. We'd take 2 slices of white bread and some mayonnaise. Now, it depended on if you were eating this in the summertime or if you was eating this in the wintertime, what we would add to it besides the bean fritter. This is a good way to, when you don't have meat, to get you a good source of protein with your leftover beans. This is my bean fritter. Now, since it's summertime and I've got fresh tomatoes, we will put a tomato on it. Otherwise, Grandma never put nothing but mayonnaise and another big old hunk of onion on hers. But we're going to put tomato on this one today, and I'm going to probably eat half, and I'm going to give Mr. Brown the other half. He didn't grow up eating bean fritter sandwiches, but I did. So there we go. That is your white bean sandwich. Y'all, I'm not crazy. These are really good. A sustainable meal. And this is another way I would eat them. These are just the little bean fritters. And I would just eat them with a little bit of ketchup. I guarantee you, your kids will eat them. They're that good. So, it's all about survival. You think, well, I just wouldn't eat that. Well, when it comes right down to it, you really don't know what you do. And let me tell you something. That white bean sandwich was one of the best sandwiches I think I've ever ate. Now I'm going to share something with y'all that I'm probably going to get some flack over. But I remember back so long ago, before I even got married, back when I was a young girl, living there with my grandparents, the word organic was not a word that I even heard, I don't think. And then into my adult married life, it was not a word that was even talked about. The word organic. Organic, I guess, to heal people, and in a lot of other places, was growing your own food. That was organic. When you went to the grocery store in my area, there was no groceries, nothing, produce or nothing that would say organic on it. It just wasn't a thing. And really, probably up till my kids were gone and gone, that I even was even seen or even hearing people talk about organic. And of course, back in the day, you didn't have all these pesticides and stuff being sprayed like they are now either. But what I'm trying to get at is, the word organic just wasn't a thing, wasn't even talked about. If somebody would have brought it up in my younger years, I'd have probably had to say, well, you're going to have to explain that to me. I don't know what that means, because it just wasn't a word that was talked. It was just not there. So now it's all over the place, organic. And then you got people that think that stocking your pantry, there's certain items that I'm just not going to put in there because they're not good for you, it's not healthy, there's too much salt in it, and, I could go on and on. If you're in survival mode and you know that there's certain things that you need to have in that pantry, that if times got, well, let's just say back there in the C word, when they tried to lock everybody down, nobody could go anywhere, and, I was blessed to have a stock pantry because I keep a stock pantry anymore. But there's also, I'm going to confess, there's also canned meat in there for hard times, because canned meat, and I'm not just talking about my own canned meat that I can up myself. I'm talking about the word spam. I don't know, there's a lot of people don't even like spam, I always have. My grandmother had always a can of spam in the pantry, and like I said, we didn't eat lunch meat, but she would open a can up and she'd fry some up, and that would be on a piece of white bread, So to this day, do I eat spam a lot? No. Would I eat some fried spam? Yes, ma'am. I love it. But I'm going to show you a meal that was made several times because there was nothing else in the pantry. Very few things that I could, that you could sit down and make a meal. But this was over some leftover rice and another ingredient, and to this day, I can tell you that because it brings back memories of things that I had to do, I have made it for my own grandchildren, and there's a couple of them that I've made it for, and they really like it. And sometimes they ask for it. So, when we want to start spewing at people about something not being healthy, and I would never have that in my pantry. When it comes to survival, you cannot be picky. And a can of Spam back in the day was pretty cheap. And right now it's still cheaper per ounce in my area than it is hamburger meat or anything like that. And I'm not saying go out and eat Spam. That's not what I'm saying. But you can always keep a couple cans in your pantry because they're going to last for several years in that pantry. And it's something that you can feed your family. And I'm going to show you how. Okay, we're going to make us kind of like a stir fry. And we're just going to be doing it in my cast iron skillet. And I chopped up a little bit of that Spam. The notorious Spam. And this would be enough for 2 people. And that leaves you, you know, the rest of the can of Spam to do something else with too. And when I cook rice, I always have extra rice. And sometimes I purposely cook a lot and then bag it up and put it in the freezer for later. So this is leftover rice. And, you know, some people don't have condiments like soy sauce and stuff like that. Well, you don't have to have it. Just salt and pepper your rice up a little bit. And maybe some different spices you might like. Maybe a little bit of garlic if you've got some garlic in the pantry. I like to put a little bit of butter on my rice. So if you don't have the soy sauce and stuff, just add you some butter to it. It'll give it a good taste. My grandkids like the butter in their rice. We're just going to warm this through and through and kind of stir fry it in the skillet, kind of like you would any other stir fry. Okay, it's been stir frying for about 6 minutes, and the Spam has gotten golden brown, and the rice is kind of stir fried, and I'm just going to add me 1 scrambled egg. So it's 3 ingredients. Your egg is going to bulk it up, plus add protein to your meal. So you just want to cook it and scramble it up a little bit, and then start incorporating it into your fried rice and Spam. And there you got it. You got a meal. It may not have been something that you purposely wanted to make, but it was things that you had because you didn't have anything else. And it worked. And it's good. You know, like I said, I can eat that right now. I have no issues with, and when I do buy a can of Spam, I buy the light, which is less sodium. But like I said, we don't eat it every day. We probably eat it once a month, so it's not like it's hurting us. And I do keep cans of it in my pantry for if there is a time that, you know, we need to use it. And if I open up that cabinet once a month, I'm like, I'm going to fry me up some Spam, or I'm going to make me some of my survival Spam, rice, and egg, fried egg, and I just do it. And like I said, I've got some grandkids that really, really, really like it. It's not a bad thing, especially when you're trying to survive. Now, y'all know Miss Lori, and y'all know that I'm a Southern cook, and most of my videos are me showing y'all recipes and how, you know, I grew up eating, and there's just so many things that I haven't even showed y'all yet. It's hard to get it all in there. Of course, I don't cook like I used to because it's just me and Mr. Brown now. You know, all my children are grown and got their own families and cook for themselves. Every once in a while they come home and eat some of Mama's cooking. But, and the older you get, you do tend to cut back on a lot of stuff. But I can tell you that there's more days now that I go back to that old-fashioned cooking. I don't spend... I go probably once a month and spend probably around $200. And that's even counting my cleaning products and stuff. So, you know, we know how to stretch our meals. We know how to eat leftovers. We know how to eat a pot of beans and make it last. We know beans and rice. If you don't have anything in your pantry but a loaf of bread and you've got a few eggs sitting on your counter, scrambled eggs and a piece of toast can get you through the day, whether if it's for your breakfast, the meal of the day, lunch, or if it's a supper. There's been many a times that I have scrambled up some eggs and a piece of toast, and that would be our supper. Because that's what we had. Leftover cornbread. Mr. Brown absolutely loves leftover cornbread. And I always try to make a big skillet of cornbread, even when it's just me and him. Of course, we can't eat a whole skillet of cornbread. And so what I do with the leftovers, I put some back so he can have cornbread and milk. That's like a snack to him, is cornbread and milk. But you can make a whole meal out of that if you had to. If you had a little bit of fresh milk or a little bit of milk in the refrigerator, canned milk, powdered milk, whatever, and you look over there and there's a couple of pieces of cornbread and that's all you got, you can make a meal out of that. You pour you some milk over that cornbread. Danny loves that. That's just one of his favorite things to eat. Also, if you find yourself not much in the pantry and not a dime to take to the store to buy anything, and you look and you've got a sleeve of crackers and a little bit of milk, crackers and milk. Danny also loves that, and he still eats that to this day, is crackers and milk. You can survive on that. That's what I'm saying. This video was not a video of trying to give y'all a bunch of recipes for frugal meals. This was a video of survival and how I, even myself, survived a lot of hard times. Another frugal meal that feeds a lot of people, or that you can eat for days on leftovers, is a pot of vegetable soup. And if you were able to make a pot of cornbread, a pan of cornbread, if you've got the cornmeal and what you need to make cornbread, that is a meal that will get you through several days. You don't have to have meat in it. Maybe you've got vegetables out of your garden. Maybe you've got some mixed vegetables in your pantry. I always keep, and sometimes they'll even go out of date because I keep enough of them, is mixed vegetables. I always have, because you can do so much with it. You can make vegetable soup. You can make chicken pot pie. Just different things like that. So I've always got that. And of course I've always got my home canned vegetables. I love frozen fresh vegetables. I love frozen vegetables more than I do canned. So because I'm able to have a freezer and keep frozen vegetables, that's what I keep most of. And besides eating fresh out of the garden, because I just think frozen vegetables taste fresher to me. Now, that being said, I've told y'all I've got a pantry that's full of canned vegetables for times that I need them. Something that I cooked for my kids that went a long ways that I could afford to do back in the day was a big pot of spaghetti. Lasagna, it goes a long ways, y'all, but it costs a lot of money. I hardly ever remember. Sometimes there were just times I couldn't make a pan of lasagna because it cost too much to make. But I could make a big pot of spaghetti because it only took, even if I didn't have hamburger meat, I can make a pot of spaghetti without it. So I'd make my own spaghetti sauce, cook up some noodles. There you got it. It was not always a simple life, but we made it. There's so many things that people don't know because the generations coming up think that survival means something else. If they don't have certain foods in their house, if they don't have, they can't think beyond a lot of things to know really what you can do to feed your family. If you didn't do that, you had a jar of peanut butter. Do y'all know how good a homemade pancake with melted peanut butter is over it? Let me tell you something, it's good. So you have to think outside the box. And you have to know that you can survive. Times are hard. Groceries are so expensive. Like I said, I'm a good Southern cook, like all these other channels that are put them recipes out there, just sharing their recipes and their life of good food. But I'm just one of the people that have been through and seen hard times, and I've known and talked to so many people that went through the Great Depression. Early 80s on up to maybe, I may be thinking wrong, middle 80s, that we could get commodities. Do any of y'all remember this? There was a little town next to us, and they would show up, the commodity truck, and you could stand in line if you thought you needed it. You didn't have to have proof of income or nothing like that. Most people were pretty honest about it, back then in this little town. And you stand in line, and they'd box you up like canned meat, beans, dry beans. Do y'all remember the commodity cheese that come in a big block? It was some of the best cheese you ever ate. There was a lot of things I can remember off that commodity truck, and it was always good to us. So you always had that kind of help. And things that, thinking outside that box and not thinking you got to have certain things that you can feed your family, it can be done. But I can tell you that the Lord has blessed me since the very beginning. He's took care of me. He's watched over me. He's guided me. And loved me. And I can tell you that God loves you so much. No matter what the struggle is, we're all going to go through these trials and tribulations, always. But God loves you. He loves me. And He gives us the ability. He gives us that ability, whether if we use it or not, the right way to take care of our families. He gives you that ability to think. I know people that's really been, that have really been, and just like me at some point, when I was just a little girl trying to feed my little brother. And I know of an instant of somebody that had pancakes for supper for about a whole week to feed her children, because that's pretty much the only thing she had. The only thing she had, and didn't tell nobody until she could do better. But she survived, and she fed them children. So it don't matter what point in life you're at, if you're young, starting out, if you're middle age, trying to be frugal, if you're getting on up in age, retirement age, me and Danny, or if you're older than us. I know a lot of my friends out there, a lot of my subscriber friends, y'all are 70, 80, even in your 90s. And y'all have a lot that y'all can share. So in your comments, if you want to comment when you've been through, and you can share things that you've had to do to get through and to feed your family, please leave it in the comments. But the one thing I don't want in the comment is people cutting others down for things they've had to do to survive, because evidently they've not ever been there. We need to be kind to each other. This world is not very kind right now, and we need to find that calm, that kind, nurturing, reassuring people to be in our circle. The main thing that's going to get us through it is the good Lord, and He's what's going to pull us through. We never know what the future is going to bring, but you cannot worry. He tells you, why do you worry? Why do you worry? He's going to take care of us. But we have to use our ability He gives us to take care of our family, no matter what it takes or what it is. But anyways, I'm going to get off here and try to think what I'm going to cook for supper. Danny's been going to take care of his mom and start my day too. And just know how much we love y'all and appreciate y'all. And if you're having a hard time, just know that you need to talk to me. You can email me. Now, something you want to share in your past that you know that helped get you through some really tough times, share it with people. So we're going to see y'all in a few days. I hope that y'all are getting through this heat. It's been rough here, y'all. It's been tough, but we can get through it. We've had dry, hot summers before, but this is probably one of the worst we've seen in a while. I've got hardly any water in my pond right now at all. Y'all take care. Be safe. We love you. God loves you. See you. Bye-bye for now.